you get a feeling of a glass ceiling. You
Mhm.
have reached the level of understanding on the conscious level, and you cannot kind of move further than that. You understand everything, but you feel like you cannot really do anything about it, where you understand that your subconscious mind needs attention. You're fine on the conscious level, but subconsciously, you hardly can fix anything. Where the state of mild trance during the RTT session, there are only two ways to reach subconsciousness. It's through psychedelic and hypnosis. It's the mild, safe, legal side of working.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now, here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. Today I'm joined by Esther Katz, a former CMO for deep tech companies who's raised over $100 million throughout her stellar career. However, her deep understanding of the mental health and necessity for quick, impactful results led her to transition into Rapid Transformational Therapy, RTT. Esther combines her business acumen, coaching techniques, and therapeutic expertise to help individuals overcome emotional and psychological barriers, delivering fast and transformative results through RTT. She takes a particular interest in the mind-body connection with ongoing research into the link between developmental trauma and the onset of autoimmune expression. In today's conversation, we are diving into RTT and the connection between the subconscious and autoimmunity. Esther shares how RTT works, and incorporating it into your healing journey can create significant improvements in health. Esther, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. I'm so excited.
I am as well. I'm so excited to share with listeners what you're doing. And I would love for listeners to get to know you by hearing more about your story. So, literally everybody I interview, didn't think when they were younger that they'd end up in the wellness and healing space, or they thought they would be a, traditionally trained doctor, and then they shifted to the functional medicine world. So please share your story, because I know that your past life, so to speak, this go round though, was more in the business space than in the healing space.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that I actually did want to end up in the medical field. I remember when I was about 6 to 7 years old, I got my hands on a book about plague and other infectious diseases, and that was my favorite book for like 2 years. And my parents
Wow.
were absolutely horrified. And here I am, working with life-changing diagnosis. Almost for 40 years later. I didn't want to be a doctor. It didn't happen, and I made a career in marketing, technology marketing, deep tech, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. And I worked in this space for 20 years. At the same time, my passion for healing, cure, medicine in all its shape and form, um, never left me. So I did a lot of self-education and self-study. And then about 10 years ago, several events in my life led me to have a mental disorder, and
Mm.
I experienced very heavy anxiety and panic attacks. And that led me on a journey of discovery of the healing for this condition. Nothing really helped me. Medication was not really helpful, and I didn't want to stay on meds for a long time anyway. So I tried every existing modality until I very accidentally clicked on a link on Google search, and I had my first RTT session, RTT is Rapid Transformational Therapy, and I am a Rapid Transformational Therapist. And as a lot of us, how we come to this modality is by experiencing it as clients. My therapist at that time, she's retired now. She managed to find a way into my subconscious and help me and guide me to completely eliminate my panic attacks that were already very debilitating at that time. And I was almost house ridden. I couldn't leave the house without the meds. And I am 8 years panic attack free, no anxiety, and happy and striving. And yeah, you could call it a miracle of healing, but this is what happened. And then, I researched RTT and I went to study. It took me 2 years to graduate. I graduated on a personal one-on-one course with Marissa Peer, who is a British therapist, the creator of Rapid Transformational Therapy. And I retired from my tech job in May.
Congratulations.
And my therapy and neuroplasticity coaching practice is what I do full time.
I love it. I'm so happy for you and so excited to share this modality with listeners. Can you give us a little bit of like what is RTT and how is it different from traditional talk therapy, psychoanalysis, cognitive behavioral, throw out any of the kind of classics. How is it different and how is it maybe similar?
Very similar and very different. So what
Yeah.
Marissa did is she was a therapist for 30 years. She worked in LA, she worked in London, and she learned every modality. And what she did, and she's very vocal about it, is that she created a hybrid method that is based on the notion that the subconscious mind drives 85% of our mental and emotional life. But it's also the most unapproachable part of our, mental and emotional activity. It's that, the conscious mind is the tip of the iceberg, is 15% to 25%. Different sources give different numbers. And then 85% is below the water. And this is what we don't see, we don't feel, we don't think about it. Yet it's the limbic system, it's the ancient part of our brain, and it's the most powerful force in a human being. And Marissa always believed that power within is the ability to heal and to cure, and that a human being is able to connect, to activate, and to heal whatever condition they have, physical or mental or emotional. And with years of practice, she learned from her clients what worked, what didn't, and she created a modality which is an independent modality acknowledged by every organization in the world. And this is what I learned, this is what I practice. And I use RTT in my coaching sessions, what I call neuroplasticity coach, which is using the ability of brain to create new neural connections, new habits, new beliefs, and change the life through this way.
Yes, that's amazing. I love it. We have had episodes on neuroplasticity. Many of us highlight often the importance of the mind-body connection in creating illness and in creating wellness. And so I love, because also RTT is pretty fast, right? Like it's not something that takes 10 years of like heavy work, is it?
That's a very good point, and this is probably the key difference between RTT and other types of therapy, is that we don't believe that it is necessary to be in therapy for years to fix an issue. And see, that was also a problem for me as a client. I remember working with my therapist, who was amazing, absolutely incredible, and helped me a lot. But at some point, this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to every client that I have seen so far, is that you get a feeling of a glass ceiling. You
Mhm.
have reached the level of understanding on the conscious level, and you cannot kind of move further than that. And you understand everything, but you feel like you cannot really do anything about it. And this gap, this is where you understand that your subconscious mind needs attention. You are fine on the conscious level, but subconsciously, through talk therapy, you hardly can fix anything. And this is where hypnosis, or the state of mild trance, that we put our clients in during the RTT session, this is where it comes very, very handy, because as you know, there are only two ways to reach subconsciousness. It's through psychedelic and hypnosis. Hypnosis is the mild, safe, legal side of
No
working with
matter where you live. Yeah. Yeah. And um, thank you for bringing that point up, because I think that is part of the, a key, right? Like you said, it's back to that iceberg of, I get this visual of somebody can, go to their therapist weekly for years and years and years, but, we can't think our way out or plan our way out of things that are being driven by the subconscious mind. And so I'm glad that you highlighted that using hypnosis is the tool you use to with your training and techniques to allow people to create real change.
Yeah, just yesterday I had this new client, and we were talking about how he came to the decision to try RTT with me. And he's been in therapy. He knows the issues with his mother and his grandmother, and his dad left early, adverse childhood experiences. And he knows all that, but it doesn't help him to move 1 millimeter from the state of anxiety and social anxiety and inability to speak up for himself. It just doesn't.
You mentioned adverse childhood experiences, which I believe everybody has. But how do they, and maybe we can play with the difference between somebody that ends up fueling autoimmunity or chronic illness or mental health challenges versus those who don't seem to have a negative impact on their life from it. But what is this connection between adverse childhood experiences and autoimmunity, for example?
So, what is the adverse childhood experience? There are levels to this. Having a distant mother is an adverse childhood experience. Having been sexually abused is also an adverse childhood experience. Of course, if a person has a combination, and most people do have a combination, not just one, and the more ACEs a person has, so people with 4+ ACEs are 2.5 times more likely to develop autoimmune diseases. This is the CDC research. As you know, it was launched, I think, in the end of 90s, around 2000s, and they have researched thousands of people, and this is the conclusion they came to. And it's very interesting how this research was launched. It was initiated by a physician who was running a weight loss clinic, right? And he noticed that there were certain clients that would lose weight while they were in the program, but then they would gain the weight back very, very rapidly. And he could not understand what was going on. So he started doing in-depth interviews. And during those in-depth interviews, he noticed that every person who had a rapid weight gain, uh, they had been sexually abused. So he thought it must have been a coincidence. So he started talking to other weight loss clinics. They started doing the research, and they discovered the same correlation. And then they brought it up to, on the state level, on the federal level. And this is how this research was launched. And it proved the fact that there is a very strong correlation. Let's say military, active duty military, one unit three officers or soldiers can be in the same traumatic event, yet two will survive it with no particularly serious PTSD, and one person will be very, very traumatized.
Yes.
And when you go back into the childhood experiences, it's guaranteed that this person had a number of ACE.
And I want to point out for people that aren't familiar with ACE, at which it's easy to find. I mean, you know, you can just Google it and you'll see the list. Not everything has to be that capital T trauma, right? You know, not everything it is something that you're even, again, back to aware and not aware. You may not even be aware that you know, some of your childhood experiences are under the surface driving what's happening in your life. And so that's kind of that difference of you can have a number of them that didn't necessarily feel like conscious trauma when you were a kid, you know. So it is a really useful tool. And what I love about what you're doing is because the understanding, like you said, something only, you know, that's great. That's an important first step, right? I always say when we want to create change, we need awareness first. But then you're providing people a tool to actually do something about it today, which is just, you know, it's amazing.
No, you cannot fix what you don't understand.
Yeah.
But it's not enough to understand. It's very important to make those connections. And in the state of mild trance, what happens is that people become honest with themselves, sometimes for the first time in their lives. Because as children, we love our parents, and we will find all sorts of excuses to justify their behavior. A lot of my clients will start the session saying, "Oh, I had wonderful childhood, just
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Well, how, okay, you have some issues now. How about your siblings? Oh, yeah, my brother, tried to commit suicide. Oh, my sister is severely overweight. Okay. So let's talk more about your childhood. No, my
Mm-hmm.
parents loved us. They were absolutely amazing. And then as you put a person in a state of hypnosis, then they start recollecting how parents treated them, and they cannot justify violence anymore because it
Mm-hmm.
becomes very obvious to them the correlation between how they were treated, how they felt about themselves at that time, the blame they took on themselves, because this is what the child does. The child will not put the blame on the parent. The child will accumulate the blame and self-hate and self-punishment. And this is where we see the flare-ups. Because when similar emotions are triggered by events in adulthood, this is when we see a lot of flare-ups in
Mm-hmm.
rheumatoid arthritis and diverticulitis and similar autoimmune diseases. I can give you an example. My client Z, she lives in South Africa, and she had a difficult childhood. The mother left three children very early age. She was around 5 or 6 at that time. And the dad was taking care about the family. He was the caregiver and the bread maker. And a lot of stress, a lot of strain. Started drinking, and she was curious and lively child, and she got a lot for it. Her dad was constantly angry with her, and she remembers anticipating the punishment coming from him for something that she would do at school or in the backyard or going to somebody's house, just being naughty and, curious and
Mm-hmm.
not behaving herself. And she believed until the day of the session that she was to blame for
Mm.
her dad beating her up.
Yeah.
But what we have discovered is the feeling that she had a ball of hot pain in her stomach was exactly how she would describe her symptoms of diverticulitis.
Sure.
And she accumulated through her whole lifetime, because she started having first symptoms of diverticulitis in her late 20s. Something triggered it, but the feeling was already there. And
Right.
then something happened at her workplace, and it became a constant symptom, and she had to be in the ER few times a month. When
Wow.
she was
Yeah.
able to make that connection, she understood that that ball of pain doesn't have a place in her life anymore.
Mm,
She doesn't, there is no danger coming from that. There is no self-punishment. All of this was, but is absolutely irrelevant right now.
yeah.
And it's not me, it's my job is to guide the client to make those connections and to eliminate what we call the role, function, and purpose of the symptom. When you take away the power from the disease, it goes.
That's amazing. One of the questions that keeps popping up in my head, so I'm guessing listeners are curious as well. Often in certain types of talk therapy, and the approach to working through the trauma. I know a lot of people that have been kind of re-traumatized, have had to re-experience trauma. And to me, that, can often be the downside of therapy. It has a time and a place. And I was a psychology major. I have lots of grad school hours in um, therapy, and but there is a downside, I believe, for some people, when that approach is taken. So is that a concern in RTT at all, or does being in that state of a mild trance, is that created like a safety net?
A few points here. It's a very, very good question. And actually, I was dealing recently, helping a colleague of mine who had working with somebody who was re-traumatized through a hypnotic session, not an RTT session, just hypnosis.
Mhm.
And the protocol was not, in my opinion, done correctly. And that person went into a state of psychosis because they were re-traumatized. And then they were sent to an RTT specialist to kind of work on the re-traumatization symptoms, because RTT is much more mild than your regular hypnosis, the kind of, let's say, hit on the head techniques to stop smoking, right?
Gotcha.
This doesn't work with trauma. You cannot use the same protocols with trauma. We treat our clients who were traumatized with a lot of care and very, very gently, let's say.
Okay.
So there is a lot of safety created around them. They are told that they're reviving but not reliving this experience.
Okay. Yeah.
They're here, present. A lot of grounding techniques are used, and there are contraindications. So if a person experiences epilepsy, has schizophrenia or other mental illness, hypnosis is contraindicated. So it's very, very important to have the whole medical history prior to making a decision to work with a client.
Really, really good information for people. But also I want to highlight, so many of us, and I can include myself, will become aware of trauma and then shove it back down, because we don't want to relive it. We don't want to experience it. We don't want to wallow in it. Yet we haven't dealt with it and released it either. So I love, that was one of the reasons I was really excited to interview you, because I haven't experienced, RTT myself, but the research that I did got me really excited that there is this therapeutic approach that seems to hit a lot of kind of the resistances people have to getting help. It doesn't take 20 years of sitting on somebody's couch. It can be safe, safer, faster, gentler. I like that word that you use, gentle. And so, I was very excited that you wanted to come on and join us.
The first time I had to experience RTT and I was told by my therapist that, she will hypnotize me, I was absolutely terrified.
Sure.
As somebody with anxiety and panic attacks, I was sure that I'm going to go in a full-blown panic attack as soon as I will close my eyes and I will lose complete control. And as you know, loss of control for anxiety
That's
and
the
panic
first
attacks,
word that came up when you
that's
said that. I was like,
yeah,
oh,
right?
Yep.
But it's the beauty of hypnosis when done properly is that you don't lose control at all. You absolutely control everything, but you're able to be relaxed and focused at the same time. I don't know any other state except of the meditative state, of course, the goal of which is to be relaxed and focused, that gives you the same feeling. So in hypnosis, even when you are going back to the event and you are feeling the same emotion that you felt when you were a child, at the same time, as an adult, you are present and you are watching over and you are able to interfere when it becomes too much. It has never happened to any of my clients that they would want to stop a session because it was too much, because there is always a balance. And we use that natural balance that is created in a state of hypnosis to do the inner child work. Because, in traditional therapy, you do inner child work, but you do it in a state of consciousness. And your
Yeah.
therapist tells you, imagine you as a child sitting on a, riverbank. In the state of hypnosis, we say, you know, go back to the age, and your subconscious mind that knows what's good for you will choose the age and go there and be that child. So it's the imagination works, and we don't know if it's imagination or subconscious or what is this.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, that's just words,
What matters
right?
is that it has a therapeutic effect.
Yeah,
And because it's in hypnosis, a person can be two people at the same time, the child and the adult, and it comes very, very natural.
amazing. I love that. That's, yeah. So when somebody comes to work with you, do they, need to already be aware of like, oh, I have this trauma, or they're coming to you because they're like, I can't live this way anymore. Help.
No, they absolutely, they don't need to be aware of the trauma. Most people will be, and it will come up in the first session, but it's not a condition. What is the condition though is an intent, an intention to
Mm,
feel better.
love that. I love that. I know I had this whole idea of like all these, digging into well, I will ask you this, and hopefully I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but um we talked about the childhood experiences. Why is what I call, and maybe that's too big of an umbrella term, the mind body connection, so important. Um, I do feel like, at least, especially with autoimmunity, but probably, pick any chronic anything, we do tend to disconnect. Like we've just lost, I think, as a protective mechanism, lost touch with, we aren't taught to nurture our mind body connection and be aware of that two-way street. But just from your perspective, why is that so important to healing? And is it really, you made a comment, you said something earlier about, pretty much everything comes back to that. So tell us more about the impact, that the subconscious can have on the body. I think the example you gave us of your client is, you know, spot on. It made me think of the book, The Body Holds the Score, which, if listeners haven't read it, grab that one, or Body Keeps the Score, excuse me. But how does it work, or do we need to know how it works?
The tissue has the issue, So there is a scientific explanation, which is basically early trauma disrupts the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and it triggers chronic inflammation. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the same result, just on a different level. Scientifically, it's what I just explained. Then there are spiritual levels, psychological levels. Each one can be chosen depending on where your beliefs are. If you believe in spirituality, then I would say, you know, a human being is a perfect divine creature. It's an eternal soul in a physical embodiment. The creator wants you to be happy, to be perfect, and to be like the creator. That's the mission and the purpose of the human life. Having that connection with yourself is what the creator has tasked you for your soul to develop during this lifetime. That's why this journey never ends. Can you ever say, oh, I am completely enlightened, or I'm now 100% mindful? That will never happen.
No.
That, that's the beauty and the paradox of this journey, because we will never be like the creator, but we strive to be like the creator. That's why we
Yes.
always want more and better. And on the side of psychology, it's been woo-woo, for years, but
Right.
now we know through all the different modalities, including CBT and psychoanalysis, that our neurological system drives every other function in the body, and it all comes from the brain. So it's electrical signals sent through the neurons to the nerves, to every organ and tissue in the body. So if your signal is negative, if your signal is, I hate myself, I want to punish
Mm.
myself, I don't deserve better, I'm such a bad girl, such a bad boy, I'm a terrible person, I want to die.
I'm not worthy.
Okay,
Yeah. All the things.
what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
I have a cancer client. And this lady knew exactly why she got cancer. And the universe and the creator are very compassionate. They will listen to you, but they will not give you immediately exactly what you asked for. So she was a hardworking woman, and she was the head of the family, and she got very tired. And at about age around 50, she said, I'm so tired. I want to rest. I don't want to live anymore.
Mhm.
If I want to be a woman, I have to be weak. And what happened? She had symptoms of osteoporosis. The same year, she made that statement loud and clear. I want to be weak. If I want others to treat me like a woman, I have to be weak. So her bones started breaking. And that was not enough. And then she got cancer. And now I'm working with her on changing the mindset and treating yourself with compassion, understanding you can love yourself without being sick, and others will love you if you're healthy, and it will be much easier for them to love you if you're healthy than you're sick. So that issue of benefiting from illness is a
Mhm.
very complicated issue, and I'm always very careful, but it's there. People do benefit from their illnesses, the secondary benefit, no matter how counterintuitive or tragic that may sound. Changing the
And
mindset breaks that connection.
and I always like to underscore, and I think the cancer example is a really good one. None of this conversation is to say that symptoms aren't real or this is all in your head or it's just that we are whole complex beings and our symptoms are just that, they're symptoms. And so even, and our diagnosis is really just a name for our collective symptoms. And we're talking about the driver, really, when it comes down to it. So that's you've given us so much to think about, and I really encourage listeners to find out more, not only about you, about RTT, but and I know you have a gift. I want to make sure that we tell listeners about. Such a generous gift for listeners. Um, Tell us a little bit about what you're offering.
I have launched my program for autoimmune and other life-changing diagnosis clients recently. And I invite you to join me for a 1 hour session, free of charge for listeners of Julie's podcast. And I promise you that during this session, we will not only talk about your issue, but I will equip you with tools, instruments, and strategies that you will feel an immediate effect of and will make you feel better emotionally and physically.
Amazing. How can listeners reach out to you?
Please reach out to me through my website, rapid-therapy.com, or find me on Instagram, Esther Katz Rapid.
Amazing. Esther, we're at that point of the podcast where people are leaning in because they want to hear your one step that they can take starting today to improve their health.
And this is what I always tell my clients. I want you to leave my session with a firm belief that you are the master of your own life. You have all the power that come to you through the Creator to change whatever thoughts and emotions you are feeling and thinking. And from that change, everything else will. But the main thing is to always remember you are the master of your body, of your mind, of your emotions.
I love it. Amazing. And that's exactly why we have the podcast. It's all about empowerment. And so I love that is a beautiful tip that nobody has given. And listeners, write it down. I would, remind yourselves. So
Write it
amazing.
down on your mirror in the bathroom
Yep.
so that it's the first thing you see in the morning. I am the master of my destiny. I am the master of my life. It's up to me. What I decide happens.
Such a gift. Esther, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Julie. It was a great pleasure.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.